The war didn't begin with an attack. It began with a signal. A single transmission, older than humanity itself, suddenly appeared across every known frequency in the galaxy. It didn't matter where you were, deep space miners, military fleets, even civilian colonies. Everyone heard it at the exact same moment. And it said only one thing: you were not meant to survive. At first, they thought it was a prank, a glitch, maybe even an ancient echo from a dead civilization. But then the stars started going out. One by one, entire systems vanished from every map. No explosions, no warnings, just gone, as if something had erased them from existence. The United Earth Command called an emergency summit. Every allied species, every fleet commander, every scientist, brought together for one question. What could erase a star system without leaving a trace? No one had an answer. Until Commander Elias Vaughn stepped forward. He had seen something like this before. Years ago, during a classified deep space mission, his crew encountered a structure, something massive, drifting in complete silence beyond mapped space. No heat signatures, no energy readings, just there. They called it the graveyard, and inside it, they found ruins of thousands of civilizations, different species, different technologies, all wiped out, all at once. Elias had reported it. Command buried it. Now, as system after system disappeared, one terrifying truth surfaced. Whatever destroyed those civilizations had come back. Panic spread fast. Fleets were mobilized. Borders were locked down. Entire planets went into lockdown. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. They weren't preparing for war. They were preparing for extinction. Then the signal changed. This time, it wasn't a message. It was coordinates. And every system that had disappeared was connected to a single point in deep space. A place no one had ever dared to go. The Council hesitated. But humanity didn't. Within hours, the largest fleet ever assembled in history was launched toward those coordinates. Thousands of ships. Millions of soldiers. One mission: find the enemy before they find us all. But as the fleet entered the edge of that unknown region, every system went silent. No communication. No signals. Nothing. And then, something massive moved in the dark. Something that had been waiting for them all along. The fleet should have turned back. Every instinct, every protocol, every survival law said the same thing. This was a trap. But humanity had already lost too much. Entire civilizations had vanished without a fight. There was no enemy to negotiate with. No warning. No mercy. Only silence. And now, that silence surrounded them. As the fleet crossed into the coordinate zone, stars began to dim, not disappear, but fade, like something was draining them. Navigation systems failed first. Then weapons targeting. Then, time itself started acting strange. Ships reported delays in communication, seconds stretching into minutes. Movements lagging. Commands executing too late. It was as if reality itself was breaking apart. Commander Elias stood on the bridge, staring into the void ahead. "Hold formation," he ordered. But even his voice echoed, distorted. Then the first ship vanished. No explosion. No debris. Just gone. Panic erupted across the fleet. "Something's here," one pilot screamed. "But there's nothing on the scanners." Another ship disappeared. Then 3 more. The formation broke instantly. Ships scattered, firing blindly into the darkness. That's when they saw it. At first, it looked like space itself was folding. Then the shape emerged. Not a ship. Not a fleet. Something far bigger. A structure so massive it blocked entire star clusters behind it. And it was moving. Slowly. Deliberately. Toward them. "Identify that object," Elias shouted. But the scanners couldn't comprehend it. It wasn't just big. It was wrong. Its surface shifted constantly, like it wasn't fully existing in their dimension. Parts of it appeared and disappeared. Angles that shouldn't exist twisted into impossible forms. And then it spoke. Not through sound. Not through signals. But directly, inside their minds. You advanced too far. Crew members dropped to their knees, clutching their heads. Some screamed. Some just went silent. Elias forced himself to stay focused. Open fire. Thousands of weapons lit up the void. Laser barrages. Plasma strikes. Nuclear payloads. Everything hit. Nothing mattered. The structure didn't even react. Instead, it moved closer. And as it did, more ships began to vanish. Not destroyed. Erased. As if they had never existed at all. Then Elias noticed something. Every ship that disappeared had one thing in common. They had locked onto the structure first. Stop targeting it, he yelled. But it was too late. Half the fleet was already gone. And the thing in the darkness was just getting started. Because this wasn't an attack. It was a test. The realization hit too late. This wasn't a war. It was a selection. The structure wasn't destroying ships randomly. It was choosing. Every vessel that scanned it, analyzed it, tried to understand it, was erased. As if curiosity itself was forbidden. Elias felt it watching them. Studying. Measuring. Judging. Shut everything down, he ordered. No scans. No targeting. No signals. For a moment, the disappearances stopped. The fleet froze in silence. No one moved. No one even spoke. And for the first time since entering the zone, the structure slowed. It was working. Until one ship panicked. A small cruiser, damaged and drifting, activated its emergency scan. Just one pulse. That was enough. It vanished instantly. And the structure reacted. Its surface twisted violently. Then, it began to multiply. Not physically, but across space. Copies of it appeared in different positions, overlapping reality, surrounding the fleet, blocking every escape route. Elias stared in horror. This isn't possible. But it was happening. And then the voice returned. Stronger this time. Clearer. You seek to understand. That is your flaw. Memories flooded Elias's mind. Not his own. Visions of ancient civilizations. Rising, expanding, discovering. And then, being erased. Every time they reached a certain level. Every time they looked too far. Every time they asked the wrong question. This wasn't random. This had happened before. Again. And again. And again. Humanity wasn't special. They were next. Elias clenched his fists. There has to be a way to fight this. But deep down, he already knew the truth. You couldn't fight something that erased you from existence. You couldn't defeat something that operated outside reality itself. Then one of the scientists spoke, her voice trembling. What if we're not supposed to fight it? Silence. Elias turned. What are you saying? She swallowed hard. What if this is a filter? A system designed to stop civilizations from going further. The bridge went cold. Because if she was right, then the message made sense. You were not meant to survive. Not as a threat, but as a rule. And rules couldn't be broken. Or could they? Elias looked back at the impossible structure surrounding them. And made a decision. If understanding was the problem, then maybe ignorance was the weapon. Prepare all ships, he said quietly. We're going to do something no civilization has ever tried before. Because if they were being tested, then it was time to break the test itself. Shut it all down. The order spread across the fleet like a shockwave. Weapons offline. Scanners disabled. AI systems disconnected. Even navigation assistance gone. For the first time in human history, the most advanced fleet ever assembled chose to become blind. Panic followed instantly. How are we supposed to fight? We're defenseless. This is suicide. But Elias didn't hesitate. Exactly, he said. That's why it might work. Because every civilization that had fallen before them had done the same thing. They tried to understand. They tried to analyze. They tried to fight. And they were erased. So humanity would do the one thing no advanced species had ever accepted. They would stop trying to control the unknown. The fleet drifted forward. No targeting systems. No data collection. No resistance. Just silence. For a moment, nothing happened. The massive structure loomed around them, shifting, watching, waiting. Then something changed. It stopped attacking. Ships that should have been erased remained. The structure didn't retreat. But it didn't advance either. It was observing, testing. Elias felt it again, inside his mind. You abandon knowledge to survive. His jaw tightened. We choose to live, he whispered. For the first time, there was no immediate response. Instead, the structure began to shift in a different way. Not aggressive, not defensive, curious. But the moment didn't last. Because not everyone could accept it. One faction within the fleet, an elite tactical division, refused the order. They believed this was a trick, a weakness, and they acted. Without warning, their ships powered up weapons and launched a full-scale attack directly at the structure. Stop them! Elias shouted. Too late. The moment their systems locked on, they vanished. All of them. Gone in less than a second. And this time, the structure reacted violently. Reality itself distorted. Entire sections of space collapsed inward, like something tearing through dimensions. The fleet trembled. The test had changed. And now, humanity had broken the rule. The voice returned, louder, colder. Deviation detected. The structure began to expand again. Faster. More aggressive. More present. It wasn't observing anymore. It was correcting. Elias realized the truth instantly. They weren't just being tested anymore. They had failed. And now, the system was resetting. Move the fleet, he yelled. Now! But there was nowhere to go. Because the structure wasn't just surrounding them anymore. It was becoming everything. The first wave hit without warning. Not an explosion. Not a weapon. But a collapse. Entire sections of space folded in on themselves. Ships crushed, stretched, and erased in ways no one could even comprehend. Screams filled the comms. Help us! We're losing control. It's pulling us apart. Then silence. Elias gripped the console as the fleet disintegrated around him. Stay together, he shouted. But unity didn't matter anymore. This wasn't a battlefield. This was extinction in progress. And then, something unexpected happened. A signal broke through the chaos. Weak, fragmented, but human. It was Captain Lyra Chen, one of the fleet's most respected commanders. Her ship was heavily damaged, barely holding together. Commander, her voice crackled. We found something. Elias turned instantly. What is it? A pause. Then she said something no one expected. It's not trying to kill us. Silence fell. What do you mean? Elias asked. It's targeting patterns, behavior, reactions, she said. It's not random. It's selective. Elias froze. Selective how? Another pause. Then, it's eliminating resistance. The realization hit like a shockwave. Every ship that fought, destroyed. Every system that tried to understand, erased. But those that did nothing, survived longer. It's forcing compliance, Elias whispered. Lyra's voice dropped. No, it's forcing evolution. Before Elias could respond, her ship was caught in a distortion wave. Lyra, he shouted. But it was too late. Her final transmission cut through the noise. Don't fight it. Change. Gone. Elias closed his eyes for a second. Just 1 second. But it felt like everything changed in that moment. This wasn't a war to win. This was a system designed to reshape civilizations. And humanity was failing. Then the structure spoke again. But this time, it wasn't just a voice. It was a presence. Every surviving crew member felt it. A question. Will you adapt, or be removed. Elias opened his eyes and made a choice. Prepare all ships, he said quietly. We're not just surviving this anymore. His voice hardened. We're going to evolve. Because if the system demanded change, then humanity would give it something it had never seen before. Something unpredictable. Something impossible. Something human. Elias stood in silence as the realization settled in. This isn't a weapon, he said slowly. It's a filter. Not designed to destroy, but to decide who gets to move forward and who gets erased. Every civilization before them had failed for the same reason. They relied on logic, on control, on understanding. But humanity had something else. Something chaotic. Something irrational. Something the system couldn't predict. Emotion. Instinct. Sacrifice. Disconnect everything, Elias ordered again. Not just systems, protocols, command structures, AI assistants. Confusion spread instantly. You're removing coordination. That'll make us weaker. Elias shook his head. No, it'll make us human. The fleet changed, not into a formation, but into individuals. Each ship acting on instinct, on judgment, on emotion. No patterns, no predictability. And suddenly, the structure hesitated. For the first time since the war began. It couldn't keep up. Its attacks became inconsistent, less precise, because there was no logic left to analyze. No system to break. Only chaos. Human chaos. And it worked. Ships began slipping through distortions. Surviving longer. Adapting faster. The system was losing control. Then the truth hit even harder. It's learning, one scientist whispered. Elias turned. What? It's not just testing us. It's evolving too. Silence. Because that changed everything. This wasn't a static system. It was alive. And now, it was adapting to humanity. The structure shifted violently. Its patterns stabilized. Its attacks sharpened again. Faster. Smarter. Deadlier. It had learned. And now it understood them. Elias felt the weight of it. We just taught it how to kill us. And then the voice returned. But this time, it sounded different. Stronger. Clearer. Closer. Adaptation acknowledged. A pause. Then, final phase initiated. The structure stopped moving. The distortions vanished. The battlefield went silent. For a brief moment, everything was calm. Too calm. Because everyone knew what that meant. The test wasn't over. It was about to end. And whatever came next would decide everything. Silence stretched across the void. No attacks. No movement. Just the fleet, what remained of it, floating in the aftermath. Elias knew this moment. The calm before annihilation. Status report, he said. Less than 30% of the fleet remains. Weapons are limited. No stable navigation. In other words, they were already dead. Unless. Wait, a voice said. It was one of the youngest officers on the bridge. There's something forming. Elias turned. In the distance, space began to bend. But this time, it wasn't chaotic. It was controlled. Precise. A shape emerged. Smaller than before. Condensed. Focused. A single entity. Not a structure. Not a system. But something closer to a being. And it was coming directly toward them. This is it, Elias said. The final test. The fleet prepared. Not with systems. But with will. No formation. No orders. Just one shared understanding. This was the end. The entity stopped in front of them. And for the first time, they could see it clearly. Not terrifying. Not monstrous. But empty. A perfect reflection of nothingness. And then it spoke. Define your existence. No one moved. No one spoke. Because there was no right answer. Logic would fail. Data would fail. Understanding would fail. Elias stepped forward. Not as a commander. Not as a strategist. But as a human. We exist, he said slowly, because we choose to. A pause. We fight, even when we know we'll lose. Another step. We care, even when it destroys us. Silence. And we survive, not because we're perfect. His voice hardened, but because we refuse to disappear. The entity didn't respond, but something changed. The space around it shifted. Unstable. Uncertain. As if it couldn't process the answer. And that was the moment Elias realized. This was never about strength, or intelligence, or technology. It was about something far more dangerous. Something no system could predict. Human defiance. And the entity wasn't ready for it. For the first time, the entity broke. Not physically, but logically. Its form flickered. Unstable. Incomplete. It tried to respond, but there was no pattern to follow. No rule to apply. Because humanity had given it something it was never designed to handle. Choice. The fleet moved. Not as one, but as many. Unpredictable. Chaotic. Human. Some ships charged forward. Others retreated. Some sacrificed themselves to create openings. Not strategy. Not logic. Just instinct. And it overwhelmed the system. The entity lashed out, but its attacks failed to land. For the first time, it missed. Elias watched as the impossible happened. The system was losing. Not because it was weaker, but because it couldn't understand what it was fighting anymore. And then, it stopped. Completely. The battlefield froze. The entity stabilized one last time. And spoke. Conclusion reached. Silence. Every surviving ship waited. Then, you are incompatible. A pause. And then the words that changed everything. You may proceed. The entity collapsed. Not destroyed. Not defeated. But withdrawn. The distortions vanished. The stars returned. The void became space again. And just like that, it was over. The fleet drifted in silence. Broken. Exhausted. But alive. Elias stared into the now empty void. We didn't win, he said quietly. We survived. But deep down, he knew the truth. This wasn't the end. It was permission. Humanity hadn't passed the test. They had broken it. And whatever lay beyond would not be ready for them. Because now, the galaxy didn't just have a survivor. It had something far more dangerous. It had humanity, unchained.